So for my vinaigrette, some apple cider vinegar. I know I just put cider vinegar on there. Who doesn't like a great mason jar? So if you have an empty mason jar, if you have an empty jelly jar, save all those glass jars because you can use them for vases. You can put flowers in them. You can put, paper clips, whatever. But wonderful for vinaigrettes. So in here, I already have my apple cider vinegar, my olive oil, which you can see has, they don't really blend together. I'm going to add a chopped shallot. So, this is a shallot. I know here at Kroger, you find shallots with the garlic and the tomatoes. You don't find them with the onions, which is ironic because they are part of the onion family. But yes, that's usually where you can often find them, certainly ask. And so I'm going to chop this up the same way I dice up an onion. So you have your root end and you have your stem end. So what I like to do, because it's round and it's difficult to cut something that is round and dangerous, is I just cut off the stem. So for any of you who have taken classes with me before, I always do this. If there's an onion, I do my onion technique. So I take off the stem. You can throw that into compost, or you can save it if you make your own stock, just like an onion end. And now I have a nice flat side to cut from. I cut straight down through the root, through the center. And now I have, again, those two nice flat sides. And the nice thing, again, about this vinaigrette, you use what you need, and then you just put it right back into the refrigerator. When you take it out of the refrigerator, you will probably have to let it sit out for maybe about 5 minutes because that olive oil, it won't harden, but it will congeal a little bit. So it will separate a little bit. Just let it come to room temperature and then give it a good shake. All right, so I've taken off the papery peel. Now what I'm going to do is, if it's a thick shallot, which this one is a little, I'm going to make a horizontal cut in the middle towards the root, but I'm not going to go all the way through. So just watch your fingertips, of course. And if you're using a smaller chef's knife, maybe a 6-inch chef's knife, that would be perfect. So what I've done, for those of you that are of the Pac-Man generation, I've cut it so it's almost like a little bit of a Pac-Man. So I haven't gone all the way through. Now I'm going to cut straight down, following those nice little lines that are naturally in your shallot. But again, I'm not going to cut through the root. So I'm curling my fingers, tucking in my thumb, and I'm just going to cut straight down, but not through the root. This also helps prevent your onion or shallot from going all over the place. Now, lately, I have been watching this chef on PBS, Cooking with Lloyd, and she is a Greek Mediterranean chef. She owns a beautiful restaurant in Manhattan, and she has been chopping vegetables for so long that she cuts a knife. She cuts an onion and a tomato just in her hand. She just does these like cuts, and then she turns it and she does other cuts, and then she cuts it right over the bowl. Me, no way. My hand, I would have no hands. But she's just very comfortable with chopping it right in her hand. I don't recommend that unless you are extremely experienced with doing that. So now here is my shallot cut, but nothing's falling out. So everything is going to stay right on my cutting board. So then again, I'm curling my hands and curling my fingers, tucking my thumb, touching the root, and I'm just going to make straight cuts down. And there's my nice fine dice. Now, when your fingers start to slide towards the root, you can always just tip it over and chop around it. But fingers come first. So if it starts to get the knife starts to get a little close to your fingers, stop. This is a shallot. These are your fingers. One's a little bit more important than the other. And tuck that thumb in. Believe me, my first restaurant job, I was at a 4-star French restaurant in New York City, and I was just an intern. And I don't even know what I was doing, but I almost cut the top of my thumb off. And I silently found the first aid kit. I silently continued to wrap it with towels. And I mean, your fingers, you have a lot of nerves in your fingers, so they bleed a lot. But oh my goodness, it hurts. So I highly suggest tucking that thumb underneath, because you should have a sharp knife. A sharp knife is a lot less dangerous than a dull knife. I mean, when I cut my finger, it hurt and bled, but it healed cleanly. So if you have a dull knife, you can either sharpen it yourself, or you can find, you know, sometimes the butcher shops, like here, our local butcher, sometimes they have a knife expert come in and do knife sharpening. Definitely take advantage of those things if you're not comfortable sharpening your own knives, because it's your best tool in your kitchen, but it needs to be safe. So I'm just gonna put my shallots right into my mason jar. I'm using my knife. I'm not dragging my blade on my board, but I'm holding it horizontally and using it to scoop up the shallots. Yes, some will certainly fall out, but we'll pick those up. Now, if you have a bench scraper, which I thought I saw a bench scraper underneath here somewhere. If you are a baker, if you are a baker and you have a bench scraper for dough, you can use that to scoop up all of your chopped shallots. There we go. I'm going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. Now, salt here at Mise En Place and in my home is a kosher or a sea salt, a salt that has the larger granules. That way you can feel how much you're using. Salt is one of those ingredients, you put too much in, you can't take it out. So if any of you have ever put too much salt in something, one, never measure over your bowl or your pot. I was making kale chips the other day and I put too much salt in there, and they tasted fine, but some things you just can't fix. It's horrible. So I'm just going to add a touch of salt. You know, you could always season your salad after, once you take a taste, if you feel like it needs a little extra salt. So some salt. You know, it's a little healthier too. That iodized salt, that really fine table salt, it's great for baking because it dissolves, you know, really well. But for everyday eating, it does definitely have that iodine taste to it. Whereas a good sea salt or kosher salt, you know, you get all those nice minerals in there too. All right, some pepper. Well, some of it came out of the jar, so we'll scoop that up. I love something with a good, nice cracked pepper. Now here's the fun part. So we have all of the ingredients for our vinaigrette. We have our shallot, and when it says minced, that just means finely chopped. So you have your shallot, you have your apple cider vinegar, salt and pepper, and your olive oil. And just give that a good shake when you're ready to use. Now, obviously, it's oil and vinegar, so it's not going to stay emulsified. If you wanted to keep it emulsified, you could always add a little bit of Dijon mustard, maybe a half a tablespoon. But there is your dressing. How easy is that? Now, I already made my croutons. Here is a lovely radish, and for this, I used a mandolin, not the one that you strum. That looks like a little guitar, but this is a mandolin. A story about a mandolin. My father is a recently retired physician assistant who worked in an emergency department. A few years ago around Thanksgiving, he's like, what the heck is a mandolin? Because I have people coming in here. Now this is small, like rural New England, right? People are coming in here with these cuts. And, you know, my dad being of the generation of not really knowing what this is, and is thinking, how sharp are those strings on that mandolin? So this is a mandolin. This is an OXO Good Grips mandolin, which I really like. You can get ones that are really handy and flat at the international markets there. Now, this is a very small object, this small radish, right? But I want it nice and thin. Now, you can certainly do this by hand. If you were to do this by hand, I would suggest making a nice flat edge, maybe cutting off the top, the stem a little bit, and then keeping that flat on your cutting board and just making nice thin slices, which works just fine if you have one of these mandolins. They do come with a gripper, but this object which is great for slicing potatoes. But this object is so small, I'm gonna go rogue and I'm just gonna use my hands. And I've already set it onto about 1/4 of an inch thick. And I'm gonna make just some nice slices of radish. Now, seriously, if you have extra radishes and want a little treat, a nice thick slice of radish with some of that garlic herb butter, and that is, call it a day. It's a lovely little hors d'oeuvre. It sounds crazy, but if you have a nice radish with that butter on top, delicious, really refreshing. So here I have, now for my apples, I left the peel on. I'm one of those people who like the peel. It's a little bit more fiber as long as your apple is clean. So I have my apple diced up. And what I do to dice my apple is I just cut around the core. I'm gonna snack on this radish. I just cut around the core. And then I cut it up. Ooh, that radish was sitting on a big pile of salt. Ooh, all right, here we go. So I have my diced up apple and I'm just gonna put that in my salad bowl. All right, simple, very, very simple. Now, if you were doing this for a dinner party, break up your greens just a little bit so you don't have big, big greens. So if you were doing this for a dinner party, dress it right before you plate it. Do not dress it ahead of time at all. Do not dress it ahead of time because it will just be wilted and you don't want that. That will not look nice. So I'm just going to break these lettuce into bite-sized pieces. Again, if you're doing this at home, have the lettuce in any shape that you want. But I just like to break it up into smaller pieces. So right now in my bowl, I just have the radishes, I have the apples, I have my croutons on the side. All right, I'm gonna give this another shake. These radishes are so delicious. They're nice and spicy. I'm gonna give that a shake. And I am going to lightly dress. So when you go to a restaurant, and usually, well, any of the nicer restaurants, your salad is already lightly dressed. And this is how we do it in the restaurant. It's in a big bowl, and we add a little bit of dressing, just enough to glisten all of those pieces, the lettuce, the apples. Take a little taste. Taste a piece of the lettuce leaf. Perfect. I might add a little bit more dressing. And that's the nice thing about having it in a mason jar. Just a little bit more dressing, not too much. You don't want it to be dripping, right? You don't want a pool of dressing at the bottom. And then you, to be fancy, take the salad in your hand. Believe me, years of working salad station. And you just give it a little twist. And put a nice little, now you could be, a little fancier and fan out, the radishes a little bit. Put a little sprinkling of the apples. I mean, look at this color. So you have apple cider vinegar as well as apples. Now, if you didn't have apple cider vinegar, you could certainly use maybe a white wine vinegar would be nice. I probably would not use a balsamic, but that's my taste. Cooking is completely subjective. These recipes are just guides for you. So if you want to change it up a little, go ahead and change it up. Look at that. And you want your guests to be able to get a little bit of a bite in everything. So I have these great croutons. I'm just going to sprinkle those croutons around. And I just toss them in a little bit of olive oil. And now they actually taste buttery. Really, really buttery. And again, these were a little tricky to cut because the bread was so fresh. So I just ripped them up. So look at these salads. I'm gonna rinse my hand a little bit here. And we'll do a big show at the end too. And these salads are, like, if you already dressed it and you're gonna eat it after we make the entree, they will be fine. You know, they're not gonna wilt in an hour. So, I mean, this is like restaurant salad with all these local fresh vegetables. How delicious. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm gonna put these over here and then we'll do a grand finale at the end. We'll show it all. Just so delicious. So simple, right? Simple. Great, simple ingredients. I mean, you know, nice, clean ingredients. A simple vinaigrette that will, you know, this can be your go-to vinaigrette. Simple. Add whatever extra seasonings you may need on there if you want, but you certainly don't have to. You can add other ingredients, but I think just that the sweetness from the apple, the spiciness from the radish, the cool of the lettuce leaves, you know, lettuce is mostly water. So the cool of the lettuce leaves, then you have a crunch from the croutons, which, you know, if there are a couple croutons at the bottom, they get all the dressing in there. So it's just darn good. Okay, our next dish, if everybody is ready, and I'll go through this slowly. Our next dish is the apple stuffed French toast. Now it has a few steps and some things I already did. I went ahead and I sauteed my apples already. So while I'm talking, if you want to go ahead and just melt that butter, your apples should be sliced. So let's bring that to, you know, my sliced apples to your mise en place. So mise en place is a French term that means all things in its place. And it's a term that chefs and my executive chefs and my teachers at culinary school would, you know, do you have your mise en place? Do you have your mise en place? In the restaurants, when you're working in a very busy 300-seater restaurant and it's a Friday or Saturday and the bulk of your business is from 6:30 or 7 to 9 and you are doing almost everybody in that seating. If you are missing one thing, it could be chopped parsley, as simple as chopped parsley. If you don't have that at your station ready and those tickets start coming in, the rest of your night is pretty crappy because you're just playing catch up and you're on a line. So you're working with a brigade, you're working with a team that are all working together to get that plate out. So if you're even 10 seconds of chopping this for every dish, it's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. And it's the same thing when you're at home. If you don't have all your ingredients ready and you're starting to cook and things then start to burn and or bubble over while you're, say, you know, you have garlic burning and then you have to go and chop up a raw chicken. And so that's burning. Now your hands are all full of raw chicken and you have to go hold that pan and shut off the pan and smoke alarm is going off. And you're like, forget it. I am calling whatever delivery service can bring me a pizza because I'm not going to make this anymore. So it's getting your ingredients ready to go before you start cooking. And that could mean the day before, that could mean a few hours before, but give yourself that time to read through the recipe, not just the ingredients, but read through the procedure so that you know in your head kind of what's coming next. Now, yes, some of these recipes are new for me too. So we will go through this together, definitely together. So for this, you need 2 large apples. I'm actually using the same apples. I believe they're golden.
They were Gold Rush, I believe.
Gold Rush that were in my box this morning. So I have these beautiful green with a little bit of red in there, Gold Rush apples that I use for both the salad and this apple French toast. 2 teaspoons of butter, which I just cut half a tablespoon. It was just easier than trying to measure out 2 teaspoons. A little bit of sugar, a little bit of cinnamon, some half and half. Now, if you are someone who is vegan, you can certainly use a flax egg for this, and then you could use an oat milk. I like my new thing now, and I am not vegan at all. I've always been a coffee and half person, but I've recently tried to get off of the half and half, and it may just be a tablespoon, but now I use the full fat oat milk, which is just as creamy. It actually is pretty good. I am very surprised, but it's very good. So we need a little bit of vanilla, some cinnamon, some nutmeg. Now, if you don't have a whole nutmeg to grate, ground nutmeg, it's absolutely fine. Your day-old bread, so we have this great sourdough here, which again is fresh, but I pre-sliced it and I've just been letting it sit out and get some air. And so I'll go through how to make a little pocket for that. And sometimes you can even age it a little bit by just leaving it in the oven for a couple of hours, like an off oven, no heat, but just putting it in an oven because it does have a little bit of heat in there and it just kind of dries it out. And then confectioner's, more butter, and then some confectioner's sugar if you want to add that on the top. So the first thing is peel, core, and slice the apples. Now again, I kept the peels on. That's me. You certainly don't have to do that, but I just find that it's extra fiber as long as your apples are clean. You can either use a veggie spray or I just wipe them down. And I also try and see where my apples are coming from. Now, unfortunately, growing apples organically is really, really, really difficult because apple trees are prone to a million different diseases. But if I know that it's from a local farm and I know where it's from, I know that they're doing their best to keep as little extra sprays and pesticides on there. I have a random apple tree in my backyard and it does grow apples, but it's diseased. So like, I just want to chop it down. The flowers and the blooms are wonderful, but it's really difficult to grow organically. And for any farmer, it's also really expensive to be organic certified organic. So many farms have organic practices. So, and they're all happy to talk to you about that. So next time you go to your farmer's market, or even, with seasonal roots, they tell you about their farmers and who they get it from and where they are. So, that is good for me knowing that I have kids. It's just nice to know. So I've sliced my apples and I've already sauteed them. I've sprinkled them with a little bit of sugar, a little bit of cinnamon, and then I just sauteed them in the butter until they were nice and soft. Almost like you were making an apple pie, but we don't want it so soft that it's going to turn into apple sauce. So I already did that. It took maybe 5-7 minutes, so it doesn't take long. So while I'm talking, if you want to just get those sauteed a little bit, go right ahead. Now I'm just going to whisk together. I know I have a whisk somewhere here. Here we go. I'm just going to put that aside. So here I'm going to whisk. I have my 2 eggs, which eggs, it's nice that I can get eggs from seasonal roots. What I did find out though is that when the market opens on Friday afternoon, Saturday morning is a great time to add those eggs because sometimes they're gone. They go pretty fast. So I have my eggs. I have a little bit of sugar. I have my 1 teaspoon of sugar. So that's separate than sauteing the apples. I have my, what do I have here? I have my 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and nutmeg. How much nutmeg did I have? 1/2 teaspoon? I think my sous chef put a little bit more. That's all right, he's 15. My vanilla. Smells good. And nutmeg is one of those things you don't need a lot of. Nutmeg and clove. Whew, do not put too much of those in there. They're very strong. They're very, very strong. And then my 1/2 and 1/2. I guess it's a little better than cream, right? And just give that a nice stir. And we're going to set that aside, and then we'll work on the pockets. And this is a little different than your regular French toast because we're actually soaking it in a 9x13 pan. So instead of taking that stuffed bread and trying to dip it into something, we are just going to pour this over in our baking dish. So I'm gonna set that aside. One thing I don't, and I've got to find out how to take it off. The iPad that I have here follows me. So if I'm putting dirty dishes in the sink, all of you are gonna see those dirty dishes. So hey, this is live TV. So it is what it is. We've all got dirty dishes and that's always the bane of cooking, I know. All right, so I'm gonna put that aside. I'm going to leave my apples here. And now I'm going to get my bread. So I cut my bread. This is a good, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches, enough that I could cut a pocket in here. Right, so this is some hands-on cooking, right? As long as your hands are clean, they're one of your best tools in the kitchen. So I have a little pocket in here. I mean, seriously, if if it's thick enough to make a pocket, you can make your own little pizza pocket in here. And I never really thought about that. So make a nice pocket. So what I did, I'll show you how I made the pocket. I got a bread knife, a serrated knife. Now, unless you break down a lot of chickens and debone a lot of things, you really just need 3 knives in your house. You need a nice bread knife. It's great for bread, great for shaving cheese, shaving chocolate, right? So this is a great tool. Your chef's knife. Now this one here is about an 8-inch chef's knife. You can go as small as 6-inch. I've worked with chefs that have had 12 and 14-inch knives. So you do you, right? Get a knife that works for you, where the handle has a good heft to it and it feels comfortable in your hand. So if there's more than one cook in your kitchen, you may have more than one chef's knife. Handles are different. Go to the store and like a good kitchen store and try out knives. Williams-Sonoma, you can go and hold and try out knives. Now, you don't always have to buy it there. Sometimes you can get great deals on Wusthof knives at TJ Maxx or Marshalls, right? But the stores are a great place to test them out. So what I did was I took my serrated knife and just halfway through, again, it's soft, so it works though, it definitely works. Halfway through, and then I took my knife and I went inside the bread and cut a little pocket. You don't want to go all the way through. And then I just turned it over and kind of did the other side.
I got on fine.
Right. So it makes this nice pocket here.
We have a question if we can substitute coconut milk instead of.
Sure, yes, you can absolutely. Coconut milk, not the coconut cream, right? Because that's sweet. That's like the Coco Lopez. That's for drinks, for a nice tropical drink. But coconut milk, yes, and make sure coconut milk, sometimes you have that fat at the top, that coconut fat. Mix that all together. You want that coconut fat in there. But yes, absolutely. And that may give it a little bit of a tropical taste too, in there. So yes, absolutely. So again, your knives, 1, 2, and then your third knife is a paring knife. And I just got these off of Amazon, and these are the best paring knives, Victorinox. You can get a set of 4 for about $15. These are great for all your little projects, if you're doing a stuffed tomato, taking the core out of a tomato, cutting some garlic, small. These are a chef's best tool, these tiny little paring knives. It gets you into all those little nooks and crannies that you need to cut. So Victorinox, Amazon, about $17, $15 for 4. So those are a great handy tool. All right, so I've made that pocket there. So now I am going to take my bread and I'm going to stuff it with the apples. And again, use your hands. I'm going to open it up almost like I'm going to open it like a pita pocket. Which I would not use a pita pocket because those are really dry. And this bread is so nice. So you want to divide your apple mixture so that you have enough for 4, right? You could do the same thing with pears. Once fall comes, they may have pears. Ooh, you could do this with peaches. You could absolutely do this with peaches. All right. So I have a nice little sandwich layer, right? It doesn't cover the whole bread, but when you cut it, it's gonna be good. And really, I think it's just 4. Actually, I may have only 3 that fit in my pan. This is a beautiful loaf. And we're gonna stuff that in there. Now, again, we have these nice slices of apples, so we don't really have to worry too much about it falling out yet. We haven't soaked it yet. So just go ahead and gently put those apples in there. And if you want to try and spread them out a little bit, I'll go right ahead. Try to stuff these nice and full. Use up all these nice cinnamon apples. You know, and if you have extra, you can serve them on the side with your stuffed French toast.
Did you eat it like that, babe?
And this is kind of fun too, if you know, you have younger kids. I know it's a lot of fingers, but if, you know, if they're clean, you know, they can stuff the French toast. It's kind of fun. You know, they can whisk, and it is a fun project. All right, I'm gonna use all these apples. And hopefully things won't get too hot in the kitchen tonight here in Richmond. It's about 90 today, which I don't like. I think it's terrible. It is what it is. Okay. So I have my mixture here. And I'm going to pour this over my stuffed French toast. Pour this over. So this is a 13 by 9 pan. You know, whatever pan you have that would fit 3 to 4. And I'm going to pick them up a little bit so that the other side gets this lovely mixture. There we go. We're going to let it sit for a little bit and soak up. You don't need to flip it over. We're just going to let it sit for about 15 minutes. Now here, live, it may be a little shorter, but we'll let that sit, and then we'll just go over our mise en place, what we need for our scallops and or trumpet mushrooms. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, while we're letting that sit. And that's gonna be delicious. So I'll put that aside. So for our scallops, now of course, if you didn't order them from Seasonal Roots, you know, make sure you go to a good, make sure you go to a good fish market where you can talk to them about where they came from, how they are packed, you know, were they frozen first? Ideally, that's really not what you want. So for these, we have our large sea scallops. You can certainly do this with the tiny bay scallops or even a seafood mix. But for this, we have these beautiful big sea scallops. Now, I made sure I took out the little mussel. And someone asked me before, mussels? Wait, no, we're doing scallops. True, but scallops have, and I don't think any of these had a mussel on them. And if they did, I took it off. But scallops, you have a little mussel on the side, and it's really, really white. So usually a bright white. And that's the mussel that keeps it attached to the shell. So what if you have scallops that have that mussel, you'll just want to take that off. And I let these sit on a paper towel, bottom and top, just to absorb any extra liquid. We are sauteing these. We don't want them to be wet. Sometimes you get them frozen from the fish market. But you want to know that they're dry packed. And even if you have a little piece, my goodness, that is fine too. And then I cut up the mushroom. So again, we have this crazy looking trumpet mushroom. You know, and mushrooms are so meaty, they're so delicious. So you have the bottom of where they grow from, and then you have this tiny little cap. So I just had a mushroom and I cut it into nice slices here, and that's about 4. pieces that I got from that, but I have all of these great, wonderful mushrooms.
Someone has a question that their scallops are still frozen, and do you suggest a quick method?
So if your scallops are still frozen, I would run them under some tepid water. Get a strainer, and just gently, I wouldn't submerge them in any water, but if you could let them run, if they're a rock, it may take some time, so you may have to do this dish a little later. Mine were frozen as well, and so I just put them in a colander or in a strainer and just run some tepid water, not super cold because that really won't melt the ice, not hot because we don't want to cook the scallops. That's why you definitely don't want to put them in the microwave. Just let that water, if you have a spray attachment, that's great too. Just be careful, it may go all over the place, but just enough to slowly melt that, melt those scallops. And once that has happened and they've all kind of come apart on their own, lay them on some paper towels and let them, pat them dry and let them drain. But these are them. These are the scallops and the trumpet mushrooms here, ready to go. And now we'll just go over our mise en place for our scallops. And by then, I'm gonna go and saute these, our delicious stuffed French toast. I had a block for a moment. I had a senior moment. Well, I had a mid-50s since, you know, once you're 50, that AARP card, I swear, it's there the day after you turn 50. And I have twin 15-year-olds, and they will not forget the one time we went to the movies and he charged me the senior ticket, this young kid. I guess I had my mask on, but we were quite hysterical. I took the discount. Hey, I'll take the discount. But I was like, I'm 53 years old. I didn't show you any type of discount card. So Regal, maybe you owe me a free ticket or something. Anyway, but like I said, I took the discount. So for our scallops, we have these delicious cherry tomatoes. Now I took some of them and I did cut them in half. Some of them were really large, but others I just kept whole because we're gonna saute these until they burst a little bit and all their juices come out. So I mean, these are, just delicious. Let's see. And I know I know it's not yet tomato season, and these come from
Lady Moon Farms.
Lady Moon Farms. Lady Moon Farms, organic cherry tomatoes. Share the love at ladymoonfarms.com. How awesome is that? And they are from, where are they from? Real organic, product of USA. I'm not even sure where they're from. But I've had these tomatoes before and they're absolutely delicious. I don't know. Founded over 30 years ago. They know what they're doing. And these tomatoes are so yummy.
Oh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, Pennsylvania. All right. Great. So another New England, tomatoes. And these are really nice. They're probably grown maybe in a hot house when it's off season, but they're a beautiful red color. And then of course we got these amazing green onions. I mean, look at those, right? Beautiful. So in this dish, we are using both the bottom, the white, the purple part, but I separated them. So make sure you separate them. We're putting them in at 2 different times, as well as I chopped the greens as far as I could go before. I always chop off the ruddy ends, the kind of funky ends. And then of course, make sure you trim them. You'll see some outer edges, just like with scallions, right? These are the green onions. What you find sometimes in grocery stores are, they say green onions as well, but they may be scallions, which are the thinner. You could certainly use that in lieu of these. These are pretty unique, but they're beautiful. I mean, they almost look like obviously like a red onion, but I like to use as much as you can. And if you, don't want to use all of the greens, save it for a stock or a soup and throw them in there for some flavor. But look how amazing those are. So I have those chopped. I kept them separate. I have a little bit of lemon juice. I have a little bit of fresh parsley. So this is my mise en place. I have everything chopped. Now, yes, down here we have a million of these little mise en place bowls. If you just have a plate and you put the little piles, you have a baking sheet, you put the little piles. Of course, any type of, I was gonna say Tupperware, but again, that's aging me. How about some Rubbermaid containers or Ziploc containers? You know, anything around here. I have my lemon juice, I have my tomatoes, I have my paprika, my mild paprika. Now, if you have smoked paprika, use that, definitely use that. And I may use a little bit of the herb and garlic butter in here too. You know, we do have some olive oil, but sometimes olive oil and butter together. You know, olive oil burns really quickly. Sometimes you can temper that if you add a little bit of butter. You can go a little bit higher and it makes it almost creamy. So I'm all ready to go for the scallops. So we'll put that aside because now we are going to make some stuffed French toast. And if you have, you know, there's probably going to be enough enough extra liquid in here that if you needed to make another one, you certainly can.
Cinnamon apples down in it. I'm just gonna.
So I have a big
Sounds good.
saute pan. Actually, it's not gonna, that's the saute pan that I used for. Well, I had a bigger nonstick pan. Of course, I have no idea where it is. So we may be doing one at a time. So I have my, and just a reminder, guys, unless you have a question, just feel free to make sure your camera or your laptop is muted. Sometimes we can hear the background. Sometimes you don't want us to hear the background. So just make sure it's muted. All right, so I have put everything, it's sitting there. Now we are going to add that 4 tablespoons of melted butter. Now I'm only gonna add half of that because I have a smaller pan than what I anticipated. I'm gonna put that on a medium heat. We're gonna melt that butter. Make sure you have a good spatula as well.
Is this for the French toast or the scallops?
This is for the French toast. I apologize.
Okay.
We went back. We did all the mise en place while our French toast was marinating in our custard mixture. So now we're back to the French toast. We're all set for the scallops, which come next. A great question. Sorry if I was going a little too fast. And these won't take long, you know, for 3 or 4 big pieces, we only have 2 eggs. So this certainly won't take long. And you don't want it too high, right? We don't want to really burn the outside of our bread and have it undercooked, an undercooked egg on the inside. That is not what we want. That is not enjoyable. And if you're gonna have this for dessert, you can keep this in the oven on a low heat. If you are not, you know, what did I put the oven on? There's one of the dishes that I put the oven on. Which one did I put the oven? Anyway, my oven's on 200, so stop that. All right, so my butter is melted. I'm going to take my first one and I'm taking a spatula, I'm going underneath, right? I think I can put 2 in here. I probably want my butter a little bit warmer, so I'm just gonna let it sit. I'm not necessarily gonna turn up the heat. And you'll want to see bubbles. There we go. And you want to make sure that there's space in between. Don't overcrowd your pan. And I'll go over that as well when we do the scallops, but don't overcrowd your pan when it comes to the French toast. Because then you don't want it to start to steam at all. And let it sit for about 5 minutes per side. And that's going to be delicious. Let me find a fun platter for those. Oh, I can hear them sizzling. Oh my goodness, the smell of the vanilla, the cinnamon, the nutmeg. You know, again, I used heavy cream, so this is a brunch / dessert. But you have, well, you have some dairy, right? You have fruit. You have whole grains in this delicious bread. You know, muffins are just cakes, right? So when you have a breakfast muffin, it's really just a cake. We just make ourselves feel better. Like, oh, it's got blueberries in it. But I can, one of my toasts, I stuffed a little bit. Stuffed. And you can always, you know, take a look. You want it to be nice and golden brown underneath. Yeah, mine still needs some time. And again, I only have 2 in here. And just let that bubble along. And while that's bubbling, again, here you have, you know, 5 to 6 minutes of finishing your prep if you need to finish it for the scallops. Right? So you have a little bit of time. You don't want it to get too hot because you don't want to burn your butter either. It does smell good. And just let that sit. In the meantime, let's see, I have all of my ingredients for my scallops ready to go. I need a little extra butter. Here, you can add, you know, if you have something like cinnamon butter in there, now you can get some flavored butters, that would be nice. All right, so the flip. You know, don't be afraid to touch it. Ooh, there we go. So it is nice and golden brown. There we go. And if you need to add, you know, fat equals flavor. So if you need to add a little bit of butter. Now, of course, you know, again, if you're doing vegan, any of the Earth Balance, any of the vegan butters would definitely work. Those are mostly, some of them are plant-based, some of them are similar to a margarine. But this is unsalted butter. You do not want salted butter. I really don't use salted butter in anything, only because I like to add my salt. I never know exactly how much salt is in there. And just let that cook. Oh my goodness, that smells so good. And of course, this is delicious. You could always add a little bit of ice cream to this if you wanted it for dessert. If you're having it for brunch, you can certainly add some real maple syrup or syrup. I grew up in New Hampshire, so I'm a diehard Vermont maple syrup person. That's all I use. None of that fake stuff. I like the smoke. I like the smokiness. You know, real maple syrup has a little bit of that smokiness from the smokehouse, you know, from when they boil it in those sugar shacks. You know, we would go as, in elementary school, we would go on field trips to the sugar houses, you know, and we'd taste the sap in all of the buckets, and they'd show us how they boiled it. And of course, I like maple candy. Not a lot, but I can. So how's everybody doing? Does anyone have any other comments, or how's it going? Am I going too fast? Do you need a little bit more time? Just let me know. So if you're doing these and they're getting really brown and you are worried that they're really brown, but they may not be cooked all the way through, that's when you can finish them in the oven. Just put it in a low oven for a little while, and you can finish it there. So I might do that. Since we are on TV. And I don't have like a staff handing me stuff underneath. So this is real. I'm here in the kitchen just like, all right, I'm going to take these, but they're so golden. And make sure you have a good sized spatula, right? So, I mean, look at those. They're like an apple sandwich, right? I'm gonna add a little bit of butter again. And then I'm going to add, oh, where's my next one? Now this one will probably brown really quickly because my pan is nice and hot. Butter, I'm just gonna swirl. Now the custard that's left here, it just get rid of it. You certainly, there we go. It's not like you can make a scrambled egg or anything out of it because it has so much sweetness to it. So that I would just get rid of. Go. And I'm going to actually put that aside so that you don't have to stand there and watch me make, 3 things of French toast. I'm going to put that aside and we'll get started on our scallops. Put that aside. Oh goodness, it smells so good. Scallops. I have a nice big pan for my scallops because I have scallops and I have mushrooms. So I have a nice big pan. I'm using a nonstick pan. You can certainly use just a regular stainless steel pan, whatever you like. Works fine. And also my cooktops here are gas, so yours may be a little different. Yours may be electric, so your hot spots, and your gas is a little bit hotter. So if I have mine on a 5, that's a medium for me. If you have an electric, you may want to go a little higher. I have an electric at home, which sometimes is very frustrating because it gets hot and then it goes down. It's not a steady flame like a gas, but we make it work, right? So the scallops are all ready and to go. So the first thing we're gonna do, make sure you have a plate handy that have the scallops on them or your mushrooms on them, because we are going to be giving them a nice saute in some olive oil or a nice sear on each side. And then we're going to put them aside and make the rest of the dish and then put it all together. So it's really a 1-pan dish, which is fantastic. This will go great with any type of, a little bit of pasta or some nice rice goes really nice with it. Of course, we're going to make these great lemony greens, which is fantastic. So for these, first thing we want to do is season them with a little bit of salt and pepper. So I'm just going to give a nice grind there and a little bit of pepper. Now you can use white pepper for this. If you are making this dish for a group of people, maybe for a dinner party, I would probably use white pepper, only because you can't see it, right? There we go. Now I'm going to take a couple of tablespoons of olive oil and I'm going to heat that up in my pan. And I'll tell you how you know that it's ready to go. And while that's heating up, I'm going to go get myself some tongs, some nonstick tongs, so that I can flip those over while that is heating up. And speaking of flipping over, let's flip this third one over.
Do you season both sides of the scallops or just one?
Yes, you can go ahead and season both sides.
Thank you.
Great question, thank you. So certainly make sure that you're using tongs. If you have a nonstick pan, that you're using nonstick tongs, right? How's everybody's French toast coming along? Stuffed French toast. Yeah, I'm gonna just throw those in the oven in a second. So how do you know your oil is ready when you go to saute or sear something? Olive oil is thick. It has some viscosity to it. So if ever you've gone to a wine tasting class and you swirl the wine and it has those legs, that's the viscosity. Oil has that same property. So when you put it into your pan, it's thick, right? You want, when your oil is ready, you want it to be so fluid that it looks like water moving around in your pan. So you want it to be really nice and fluid. You may see a wisp of smoke. What you don't want to see is a lot of smoke or any black smoke. Mine is on a medium, it's on a 5. So it's on a medium heat. And again, this is gas. So I have some nice heat going on. So I am just going to go ahead, 5 or 6, because we just want to get a sear. We're going to put those scallops back in, and I'm going to first put in my trumpet mushrooms, put those around. Then I'll go ahead and put my scallops in. And again, you do not want to crowd your pan. You want to hear a slight little sizzle. And then again, you do not want to crowd your pan, because if they're touching, the scallops are touching each other, they're going to start to steam. And water, you know, they naturally have water in them, and water will start to pop in that oil, and that's not what we want. I'm excited for the mushrooms. You know, if you have a little piece, you can just put that in there too. You want to hear that nice little sizzle. And again, only about a couple of minutes per side. So while that's in there, I'm going to take that last piece of stuffed French toast, and I'm just going to put that in the oven just to keep more and maybe finish off cooking just until the end of our cooking segment. So here's my plate. I'll put those aside. I'm not too worried that that was the same plate that the raw scallops were on, because you can eat raw scallops in a nice ceviche or crudo. And you don't necessarily need color. We just want them to be maybe slightly brown. Sometimes the ones in the center get a little bit brown first. And you might see some bubbles, like some water bubbles in there. And that's fine. Just keep an eye on them. To keep them from sticking, give them a good shake. And that's another thing, the sticking. If you are using a stainless steel, make sure that your oil is hot first before you put anything in there. If you put your chicken in and then you put your oil in and you heat them all up together, that means that your chicken is cooking just on that stainless steel. There's no fat in between to keep it from sticking, and when you go to flip it over and it shreds, that's because you haven't let it cook in that fat and that oil, and it will release itself when it's ready. Ooh, the mushrooms are getting nice and a little bit of browning there on the mushrooms. I'll go ahead and turn those. Ooh, I'm getting a little bit of color on the scallops. Now remember, we are putting those scallops back into our pan. You know, the scallops will shrink a little bit. That's okay. That just means that the water, they're cooked and the water is being released from the scallop. And the nice thing about doing this, this is a one pan dish, is that you'll also pick up all those nice kind of caramelized bits of scallop that are at the bottom. So look at those trumpets. So you want that nice browning. Here, I'll put that in the front there. Of some of these scallops. Yeah, just a little bit of color. Scallops are very buttery. They are easy to overcook. There we go. Look at those nice trumpets. It's amazing how much water they retain. Even mushrooms. Mushrooms have a lot of water. That's why whenever you're cleaning mushrooms, do not soak them in water. If you need to just give them a quick spray, go ahead and give them a quick spray, but you really don't need to put them in a lot of water, because then when you go to saute them, they'll end up like canned mushrooms, because then all they're doing is releasing the water. So I'm adding a little bit more oil to the same pan. And I'm going to get my mise en place prep here. I'll put that right in front. And the first thing we're going to add are the whites, or for this dish, we're going to add the purple. The whites of the green onions. Go ahead and add those in there. Just for about a minute, not long at all. I am going to get the butter and have that handy. Where did I put the butter? Maybe I put it on my tray. Oh, here it is. I did put it on my tray. I had my mise en place right in front of me. All right, so I'm adding that just for about a minute. Now I'm going to add the greens of the onions. That smells delicious. The tomatoes. And I am going to add a pat of this herb and garlic butter. Just a little bit. I love the cow print. This is like a little, it's about the size of an individual Ben and Jerry's cup.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at that. This is perfect to saute greens, or let me grab a spoon. Just maybe about a tablespoon. And of course, this is nice and soft, so any extra bread that you have, it's just delicious. Now this is still on a medium heat. While those, I'll use this instead. Has a little bit of extra butter on the end of the spoon. Already that smells fantastic. I am going to add 3 of the 4 tablespoons of my parsley, because we want a little bit of that parsley to garnish. I also have some beautiful pea shoots to garnish that too. So I'm going to add in that parsley, leave a little out. I'm going to add in that lemon juice. It's about 3 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. All right, add that in there too. And then a little bit of mild paprika. Now, again, you could always use some smoked paprika. Let me grab a spoon over here. You could always use some smoked paprika or some hot paprika. This one is just. And for this, we just need half a teaspoon. Now I am going to add my scallops, my sauteed scallops, my trumpet mushrooms, and all of that delicious juice that is accumulated on my plate. So just be careful. You can drop, if it's on a plate, you can drop it in really low. Again, this is hot, so you don't want it to spatter. I'm gonna give that a good stir. And I'm just gonna let that sit for about a minute or two. Just to get that heated through. Oh, that looks so nice. And we'll keep this out. I'm gonna move this stuff out of the way. And then we'll platter that up. Just so you can see it on the plate. We're gonna keep these plates aside because we also have those lemony greens. And this is great for kale, for Swiss chard, even for spinach. It's really, really nice. Now, when you're doing this at home, you may want to cook down those tomatoes a little bit more until they start to burst. Here, because I cut most of them in half, they are already getting a little, you can tell that they're bursting because the skin gets a little wrinkly. Wrinkles are okay. All right. Now, if you have a little piece of scallop, you know, you can certainly taste it and try it, right? You know, you want to taste your dishes as you go along. Those scallops are so buttery. Ooh, they're so delicious. I'm gonna add a touch of, and then what I'm gonna do, I'll plate up 2 plates. One with the trumpets. Look how lovely these trumpets are. Now, I did cook them with the scallops. So the trumpets will have a little bit of a seafood essence to them. But look at those. Where's my one last trumpet? Here we go. Put those in there. Oh, look at this. Delicious. All right. All right. So we have all of this lemony. I guess we have a couple of things with lemon. Lemon just really brightens things up. I'll add a little bit of parsley, and then we have these incredible pea shoots. Caterers and private chefs love these pea shoots. They're just so pretty. Now you can saute these down too, but they do make nice little garnishes. Top. Break them up. So that is our trumpet. And we'll put that aside when we're ready to present everything. And then we'll do our scallops. So look at this, some nice seared scallops. Nice, you want a nice light spring to them. You don't want them to be too tough. Not that they won't taste fine. You want to eat them at the perfect temperature and texture of how they should be enjoyed. And they're quick, right? Scallops are quick. Even those trumpet mushrooms, quick. A little bit of that sauce, that lemony sauce. Delicious. Right, some of these really pretty pea shoots. Just to give it a little green. A little bit of the parsley. This is soigné, as one of my chefs used to say. Soigné, so he'd walk through the kitchen. Soigné, if there was a celebrity or a VIP, somebody in the kitchen. Soigné. So, high-end, fancy, very important, soigné. I mean, look how pretty that is. Now remember, we're adding those greens on there too. So we have these lovely scallops. We have these incredible scallops. And we'll put that aside. And then our final dish are the greens. All right, we'll just put this aside. Now you'll want to get, I apologize, there are a lot of pans. There are a lot of pans for tonight. So you're welcome. You could take a couple of minutes if you're finishing up your scallops. Now, if you're gonna have these for dinner, I wouldn't even plate them now. Just keep them in the pan, maybe give it maybe put a cover on halfway. And then, here we happen to have, a whole bunch of pans. But for our last dish, you'll want to get a nice saute pan for our greens. But I'll give everybody a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions, if you need to just kind of catch up. We'll let everybody do that. And this one does not take long at all either. We're just sauteing down some greens. So make sure you have a cover, which I need to get a cover for. And we have a cover down here that looks like a Captain America shield. Here. We have a lot of pans that may not have matching covers in your house. If you have pans that don't have matching covers, you can use something like a sheet pan, a cookie sheet. I do have at home, I did get myself a silicone cover that works for all different sizes because it adheres, the edges kind of adhere to the pan, which is fantastic. So here we have this gigantic. So our lemony leafy greens. Now curly kale, we love curly kale. And again, I have my mise en place. I am going to add a little lemon zest to this. So I have some lemon juice, some real lemon juice. The lemons that I had down here were not so great, so I just have the real lemon juice. I have my nice kale. I did toss them in a little bit of olive oil just to help soften the curly kale. You could use a red kale. You can use baby kale. Sometimes you can find baby kale at the grocery store. 1 garlic clove finely chopped. Now, if you have a garlic press, certainly use that. I find it's just another tool. Sometimes I get frustrated because it gets really clogged up and it's a pain to clean sometimes. But if that's easier for you, definitely use that. I don't recommend the pre-chopped garlic in a jar is fine, but it tends to have a lot of water in it. So you go to saute it and it burns so fast. So, you can get 2 whole bulbs of garlic for $1 usually at the grocery store. And there's nothing like fresh garlic. Some lemon juice, some salt and pepper. Pretty straightforward. But I am going to add a little lemon zest at the end. So the first thing we want to do is put it on a medium-high heat. So for me, that's like a 7. Medium-high heat. This will not take long. This will look beautiful on the plate. So I'm going to add the oil. We only need about 1 tablespoon. Again, we want that oil to be warm. We want it to be fluid in our pan like water. We don't want those long legs. Not for this. So we want to be able to move it around really fluidly. All right, now I'm going to add my garlic. And that'll be quick, right? Just a quick. And we don't want it doesn't need to be brown. We're not browning our garlic. We're just sauteing it until it's nice and soft. So not even a minute. and just move it around. Count to 30, you could do some squats if you need to, which I definitely need to do some squats. Now again, my kale with this curly kale, it tends to get some sediment in there, so definitely soak it. Put it either in a bowl of water or put it in your salad spinner in water, and then take it out of that water. You do not want to dump it out because then everything that fell to the bottom is now back in. So here we go. We're going to add in the greens. Get them popping. We're going to give them a little bit of a stir. Oh my goodness, that garlic smells so good. I'm going to lower it and I'm going to put the cover on. And for this, we only need about a tablespoon of lemon juice. So that's like a spoonful. I'm gonna have that ready. So I have that ready. I have my lemon, because I am gonna add a little bit of lemon zest. That's optional. Now zest is the outside of the lemon. You can see someone peeled some pieces last night. They made a lemon tiramisu last night, so that's probably what that's from. So we just grate. You can use a microplane zester here, and it just gets the very top part that has all of those delicious essential oils. Oh my goodness, look how bright this is. This I may give a little bit more time because my cover is not exactly, does not feel as tight. All right. All right, we're gonna make room for our fantastic plates here. I'll keep that by my side. I don't need my knives anymore. Well, you know what? I might cut in half one of the stuffed French toast. So we have our 2 plates there. All right, let's see. Perfect. My garlic is nice and brown. Oh my goodness, it smells so good. There we go. The lemon juice. Give that a nice stir. Look how bright that is. A little bit of lemon zest. Just over it. Lemon zest really brightens a dish. And it'll go so nice with our lemony scallop. Oh, that smells great. All right, put that aside. Look at those greens. Look how bright they are. Make sure you get some of that garlic. Look at that. Oh my goodness, the garlic. And you certainly don't have to put this much. I did put a lot of greens on there. But that looks delicious. Now I'm going to get my French toast out. Put that on a plate. Oh, that smells good. The cinnamon smells really good. Let's do that. Let's find our spatula. We don't want any raw egg on there. Ooh, and it's crispy on the bottom too when you. bacon. That, and then let's cut this one. Ooh. Look at that. It's like an apple pie. So we'll kind of do that. That we definitely need a little, well, the thing with powdered sugar is that if you put it on something when it's warm, it's not, you're not gonna see it. It's just gonna melt. So we're not gonna put any powdered sugar on there. I'm not gonna have any more leftover slices. But once it cools a little, definitely put some powdered sugar on there. And then we have our salads. Let's try and get this. I believe the kitchen looks. Thank goodness I have a big commercial dishwasher. So we have our dessert there. And then of course we have our fantastic, that, 2 salads. Look at these salads. You have these amazing salads. Now, yes, mine was dressed and it's been sitting, so it may be slightly wilted, but it's certainly not going to change the flavor. So let's see for the camera. Bring that up slightly. Little food styling. So you have an entire, we'll get all this stuff out of the way too, so you can get some of the seasonal root stuff in there. So we have our delicious apple, radish, and apple, spicy radish and green salad with our vinaigrette and our toasted croutons here, which is delicious. You have our sauteed scallops or trumpet mushrooms with a really nice spring onion and tomato sauce to go over it. Nice and bright. We've got that lemon juice in there. And then of course we have our lemony kale greens. Look how bright and beautiful those are. You don't want to overcook those until they turn really brown, like a canned spinach. That's usually not very attractive. This is nice and bright, and we have the garlic with the lemon, and a little bit of that lemon zest in there too, so you get a bite of the lemon in every forkful. And then of course for dessert, we have this incredible apple. Here, I'll do it this way so you can see the sliced apple. You have this incredible stuffed French toast. And this, again, this can be seasonal. Right now, I wouldn't do this with berries because they just explode everywhere. But right now, you know, the apples, you can get plenty of apples. As we get more into summer, you could do peaches, you could do plums in here too. That would be really nice. So that is the great thing about shopping seasonally, is that you can have one recipe and adapt it to what is available. Whether it's at your market, at your farmer's market, at your at seasonal roots, or even at the grocery store, right? So here we can cook seasonal. Now the greens are really coming out. You can do the same recipe with spinach, with Swiss chard if you wanted to, with red kale, lacinato, the dinosaur kale you could use. And of course you can use any greens you want. If you used an arugula, it would definitely be even spicier. Icicle radishes are wonderful on there. You could do a hard-boiled egg on there as well too. So, I mean, how fantastic. It smells, I hope your kitchen smells just as delicious as this kitchen here.